Good morning. I'm Walt Bartman. I'm the director of the Yellow Barn Studio Clinico, and we're doing a series of instructor interviews. Today we have Marcia Klioze, who is a well-known artist in Loudoun County, Virginia, and she is on the faculty at the Yellow Barn Studio and has been teaching portraits and still life painting. And we're going to discuss a little bit about her and her work. But one thing I want to talk to you about and say about Marcia is that she's really someone you could really learn from, and I think she brings a lot of experience. So I think what we're going to do today is find out a little bit about who she is. So good morning, Marcia.
Good morning, Walt. How are you?
Good. And the thing that we're going to do today is just ask you a few questions and get you started. And it's going to be you discussing your work and a little bit about yourself. So the first question I would like to know is, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, okay. I basically started oil painting the way I'm painting now, strictly in oil, about 8 years ago. And before that, and all my life, I was an illustrator, and I worked for a company on a National Institute of Health contract for up until I retired, basically retired or started my new career, whatever it was, as a medical illustrator. And before that, I worked as an editorial illustrator for the Washington Times in their magazine. Um, about 8 years ago, I mean, I've been wanting to paint and do what I want to do for a long time. And I was let off my job and getting older. And so I just started painting, and I ran into someone at the Art League. A friend of mine overheard a conversation about his fast figure workshop. And I chimed in and I said, "Can I take it?" And he said, "Have you ever drawn before?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, just sign up." So I did. And then he was going to Italy, and it was my birthday. And so I followed him out to Italy. And ever since then, I haven't looked back. I've been painting just in oil and figures of what I always wanted to do and been teaching. That I've always painted and all my life. So,
Yeah, the one of the reasons that I hired you on our faculty is you come with a great reputation. I mean, a lot of people know your work. The quality of your work, I think, is outstanding. And I think from the standpoint of anybody who really wants to learn from you, you've got a lot to offer. So let me go back a little bit further. You where were you born and where did you go to school and just give us a little background on your personal self.
okay. I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Washington D.C. Actually, I grew up in Silver Spring. I went to the Corcoran for a while. I went to Montgomery College for a while, but most of everything I've learned actually has been through instructors, Danny Dawson, Kurt Schwartz, people through the Art League actually, and um, and the group of people here that mostly learned just studying. I'm always going to a workshop. I'm always teaching. I learn more from teaching, and I'm always taking workshops and classes. Also, I'll probably be a student till I can't. I don't see myself ever not being a student. I just love being around other artists and learning from them, and it's just an amazing way to grow.
Yeah, I
So
think that we do that. Not only that, but we do it with our own students. Students that in our classes can offer us things that we didn't think about sometimes. And I think it's really interesting how this wasn't a field where you were continuously learning. I think that you would just not really be in it. I mean, it's kind of the thing where it just doors open up, and I feel this is one of the things we want to do for this anyone who's watching here is to say, think about taking a class, with Marcia or one of our other instructors at the Yellow Barn Studio. The When you were younger, what made you choose the art field to begin with?
I think I was really lousy at sports. and And I was just always off drawing pictures, or, I would zone out in school. I remember as a little kid and drew my teachers, and I just always liked drawing. I would go off into my own little world and draw.
Mhm.
But I used to, when people ask me that question, I kiddingly, with an element of truth, they're saying, I didn't like sports. So everyone was out playing a sport. I was sitting back and drawing pictures or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's interesting. And the so with that, okay, I think the other question I might ask you is, you know, what is your work about?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons I've always been fascinated with people, um, and their surroundings, and being able to depict it through paint and through drawing. I feel like anyone can really learn how to draw, um, if you want to do it technically. And you can, and that's fine. But it's getting those, having that relationship with what you're working on, what you're doing. And I also believe people should really paint what they're drawn to paint, what makes them move, what makes them want to move. I've always been a figurative artist. I moved on to, I like it even in a landscape. I like incorporating person in it, or a building, or something that's human in it, some kind of or animal, or just something else. And I like this still life too, but even the still life, I like to make it a personal statement. That still life can actually be a portrait, if you think about it. But it's getting your feelings in it. Lately, I've been doing paintings of musicians, and I love music. It's another passion of mine, and I like the shared passion that musicians and artists have with their work. I'm attracted to passion, no matter what it is, whether it's, a sport or art or whatever. And so I like to put it down. That's my way of translating it and communicating it.
Yeah, your portraits are really masterfully done, and I think this is one of another reason why somebody should consider taking classes with you, because honestly, when we look at your work, everyone will see the level that you've achieved, and your awareness as to dealing with the portrait. The I guess the thing that we're going to do now is I want to ask you one other question, and that is what artist are you most like, and perhaps maybe artists that you've been influenced by.
Well, lately it's been a lot of contemporary artists, people that are alive now, that I am so blown away, especially through the internet, with the access we have to learning and seeing other people's work. And that I'm actually Facebook friends with them, and I get energized by it. There's a guy named, I wrote it down because I could never pronounce anything right, but Alex Venezia. He's
Yeah,
just,
I saw that
oh my
on
God, his
YouTube.
work, it's composition. It's
Mhm.
composition. It's capturing the soul. It's not just a blank portrait. It's just beautiful. Nelson Shanks, I love his work. Um, he died a couple of years ago. Of course, Sargent, Soroya, and guys like that. But I'm also interested in women's work too, that if from the past, Elizabeth Braun, uh, the struggles that they had to get noted when it's such a hard world to get, recognized anyway. Some of her work, Rosa Braun,
Hmm.
you
A wonderful painter. Hmm.
just yeah, just and amazing being in, not just as a painter, or and she didn't do portraits that much, but she did a lot of landscapes, and painted the peasants and painted the animals, and you know um but yeah, I'm attracted to the realist painter. I'm a realist painter, a representational painter, whatever you want to call it. And that's the type of work I'm attracted to. And and even Camille Corey, there's another woman that is alive now that her work is just gorgeous. Um, you know,
Yeah, so this
and
is
also some of the Russian painters, past and present, they're amazing.
yeah.
That we have access to see now. We can,
That's
just
one
through.
of the things. I think I was just reading a book by Grigory Kepish, and one of the things that he said is that everybody's a neighbor now. All right,
Yeah,
which is very interesting. It's like you can have somebody taking your class. I have a woman signed up from England and one from British Columbia, and when you're dealing with them, they're right there, right? You're having a conversation with them, but yet they're miles and miles away. And this is one of the things that virtual learning can do. And honestly, anyone who's watching this, and you may be somewhere in, you know, like I said, in Canada or somewhere, and you decide, hey, I really like listening to Marcia and I want to take her class. Well, you can, because it's, they're virtual. And I think the virtual learning is here to stay, even though we really do want to be back in the studio. I think as a portrait painter, being in the studio with the model, there's nothing like it. And I feel, we're challenged by it now, but we're making the best of it. How did that, this virtual learning, how have you responded to that?
you actually have to be pretty on, and because everybody's looking at you and studying something, and I kind of developed a system where we'll look at each other's work. I'll look at their work. We go through critiques. I'll do a demonstration, and we'll talk about the demonstration. Usually, the classes aren't more than 10 people in it anyway. You can have more, but I like it if the artist, the students paint along with me. And then we have a time where I do go through other art, contemporary artists and historical art. And I mispronounced Rosa's Bonner that I was thinking of. And I just thought of that. But anyway, um, and so I'll go through other people's art. We'll look them up. We'll research it. We'll talk about their work. We'll talk about why it's good, why the composition is good. We go through a little bit of everything. It's not just still life. It all has to do, I work from big shapes to small. So it doesn't matter if it's a portrait, a landscape, or a still life, you're still working with that concept. And so we review that, we go through that, we go from the beginning to the middle. And I like taking them to the end of a painting too. I know that when I was taking classes, you were always just doing the beginning. I like to see finishing up a painting and talking to the students about it, reviewing their work. It ends up, you have a glass of wine with each other, or you make new friends and you revisit old ones and you just kind of connect. And it's energizing being around people that are so into it and want to learn, and you share that with each other. I think I get more out of it than they do. It also makes you work faster, because you're doing a demo. And so sometimes your demos turn out really good because you're not hung up on little detailed things. So it's good for me personally as an artist
Yeah,
also.
I think that this is one of the things that we're seeing. The virtual education is not going to go away, and I know in the future, when we do go back, we'll be both doing both virtual and in person teaching. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to go to your work now, okay, and you're going to just say some things about each piece and maybe some of the stories or what you were trying to achieve in the work. So the first one, let's go and we're going to go and share the screen now, and you should be seeing a PowerPoint, are you?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is always the thing that I worry about. We're going to play from the start. All right. So the first piece.
Okay. The first piece is of my granddaughter, Mackenzie. And she's just such a pretty little girl, if I'm not biased. But and I put the butterfly in there because she was playing with her skirt, and and it just looked like that happened. In the photograph, she was actually posed with another little girl. but I just got her this moment of her aloneness where she was all dressed up. I believe she was at a wedding. And then she just sat in the dirt and was playing with a butterfly. And it just describes her personality and just my love for her. You know,
Yeah, there's a lot of love in this piece, and it's beautifully done. One of the things that I look at in your work, and we'll talk about this, we'll talk about working from life or working from the photo. One of the things that you're able to capture is, I think, the personality. I think that this is one particularly where you can really feel, what's in her mind, which I think is, done this beautifully. The design is excellent. Speaks of your background as a designer, all the years that you've worked. Um, you know, Speak a little bit about the photo and how you work with the photo.
okay. Well, actually, I did not take this photo. I believe her mom took this photo, and they were at a wedding, and she just sent me a bunch of photos. In the photograph, I can manipulate them. I'll look at a photo. I look at every photo or whatever I see and say, how would this translate into a painting? Um, some photos are really good photographs, but they're not going to be better paintings. And so I look at a photo as reference material. So I cropped the photo. I added, the leaves were in the background, and there was, and her cousin was in there with her, and the butterfly wasn't there. And it just kind of happened. I just loved the soulfulness of her face and wanted that to be the focal point. And I struggled a little bit with what colors to make the butterfly. I didn't want that to be distracting. I wanted it to be, oh, she's looking at a butterfly, because I wanted her face to be there. So I put the butterflies that just kind of muted into it. And I didn't put, distracting colors that were going to pull your eye away from her in there.
Yeah, this is a really delicate one. It speaks of the child. I think, Mary Cassatt, I think, was able to capture that quality in her work, and I think you do it well here. I think looking at your design, I mean, it really is a beautifully designed piece as well. And, when you're looking at design, is there anything that you think of when you were looking at this particular design as to what and how you manipulated things other than, like I said, or you said, put the butterfly in. Was there anything else that when you looked at her, that you thought of design wise?
Well, when I look at it, and now I love the dress that she was wearing. I like the different textures in the painting of the dirt. I really wanted to get this subtleness of, and I don't know if you can see it in the photo there, but the subtleness of the lace work on top and the till in the bottom of it with her legs coming through. I wanted that to be in there, and I wanted it to be subtle. But what grasped me in the first place was her. I liked her hair, the playing of the different colors in her hair, and just putting that all together. Putting the butterfly in there was kind of an afterthought, and it was just kind of this sweet look on her face that kind of was detached from where she was, but really happy to be where she was. And the connection between her and the butterfly was just such a peaceful, like a connection between, she understood the butterfly in a way,
Well,
you know.
and that's not easy to do. So, I mean, this speaks of your, the ability that you have. It's a wonderful piece. I think the interesting thing for me is how you've posed the hair relationship to the arms. The arms, there's a duality in the hair, which is the two sides that are going at an angle, and the arms going in the same angle, and then going to the hands. They repeat that same direction. So it's really interesting how when you're designing something, how you can use a certain diagonal or something to really design the piece around. And I think that, you can feel also that the flower in her hair is related to the way you've handled the dress. The dress has a certain sense of a flower as well, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think that repetition is really quite nice. The next one, you said you really like music, so this is a great example of what you're dealing with. You can really feel this particular piece. This is one of my favorites of yours, by the way. Um, what do you think about this one?
This is one of my favorites too. And I like this band. I know these band members, and I simply know them because I used to go. They played in Leesburg. This was I actually had a show at this restaurant. It's Casa Nostra. And I would go there all the time and just snap a lot of photographs. And I really liked the play of the muscles in his arm and in his cheeks, and the different colors in his hair. I don't know, photographs. I'm really a colorist, and I really like the subtle play of colors. And so, like in his hair, to get kind of the close crop nappy look, I was playing with purples and blues, and frankly, I love his skin tone. You can just really get highlights in there because he has dark skin, and the richness of all the different colors that are in there. Um, and then in the background, that guy in the background, Mike, he was just so into his music and playing along, and it really was just a matter of putting a few different shapes in there to pull that together. And the contrast of the saxophone also, that was hard, of making sure you had to get that saxophone right, because you'd be called out by a saxophone player if you didn't get it right.
Yeah.
But I did have fun, and it was a challenge with the composition of the brickwork and the wine bottles. I just thought all of that X going down in there was pretty fascinating. And the shape of the way the saxophone is going up into the corner, design wise, it almost makes an X, um, and pulls you right into that, his face and his hands. I like, this is one of my favorite pieces. I saw this one, and it was an award winner. I forgot, for ARC or one of those. The other one, little girl, was too,
Yeah,
for
these are
OPA.
well, and
Yeah.
people looking at your work now. I mean, really getting a feel for who you are. I mean, your abilities. How long did a piece like this take you?
Sometimes it depends. If I don't have a deadline, sometimes it will take me forever. It's like reading a good book. You don't want to really finish it because you're enjoying it so much. But I guess this took a couple months. It could have been shorter, but I had to wait for glazes to dry. And a lot of times when I'm working on a painting, I need to step back from it for a while and not be so close to it and then go back. I'll work on more than one painting at a time, simple for that reason. And this one, I had to be pretty accurate. I wanted to be pretty accurate with the lightness and with that saxophone, um, and the brick and everything. So then I will do something like a still life where I can loosen it up, and it just loosens me up. It's like doing stretching exercises, if you're working out or something, to get back to it. And then you see it with a better eye afterwards. So I
Yeah,
would say something
that's a
like
good.
that for me comfortably. If someone's commissioning that, I would say 3 months or so, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think um, when we look at a piece like this, there's a lot of knowledge put into the piece, and a lot of awareness, and a lot of, students particularly, they need to understand how committed you are to making, reaching the end result. And I think, when you look at the way you've handled, his cheeks, and the fact that we can really feel. Uh, air being blown into that saxophone. I think it's a really, it's a magnificent piece. It really is. And the colors work really well. And I know that when you have a black and white photo, or even a photo with color, it doesn't give you what you know, you have to bring to the painting, because it just doesn't give you the subtleties, that you're working with. Um,
That painting also in his shirt, there's a lot of excuse me, subtle blues and purples in there too. It just doesn't pick up on the photo, but you know,
Is there
it's
a palette that you use? Are there certain colors that you find yourself, uh, you know, working with, or do you just have a variety of color on your palette?
Well, I use Perylene Red and Permanent Rose is the color. Um, I try to have a warm and a cool color of every color on my palette at least. So I have a warm yellow and a cool yellow and a warm pink, a warm red and a cool red.
Mhm.
I find Permanent Rose to be a good transition color when you're going from your warmers and transitioning into your bluers, like underneath the jawline where, you have that turn there and it's bluer or greener around the jawline or cooler. Permanent Rose is a good transition color, no matter what color you are. Um, and then it gets oranger and yellower on top of that, to pull it. But I like those colors. I'm experimenting lately with other colors too, as I watch other artists and I like their work, and I'm always interested in what palette, so there's no absolutes on anything. And as far, when you asked me this question earlier too about composition, and it seems like, and especially in taking the classes, and what I tell my students is that you want to learn these rules. Like I'll set out a color palette, especially in teaching portraits. This is one I was given, when I started taking it. But then as I go, I experiment. And the thing is to try and mix them and understand why the colors work with each other and not just assume that this color out of this tube is going to be there. Try and match it, you know. Do color studies. Don't even paint anything else, just to see, I want to match that color wood and what it takes. I tend not to use too many earth tones. And it's like I told my students at one time, we were doing brown, I had a still life set up. It was a brown leather saddle and brown this and brown that. I said, all right, now you can't use color brown. So
Interesting. This to speak about this because there's a lot of earth color in this, or at least it appears like there's a lot of earth color in it.
I usually don't, I use raw umber to kind of draw things out in a light, thin when I'm drawing it out in the paint or, laying down the composition. And then I tend to not use umber that much. And I'm starting to use it again, but I didn't use black. And I make my own basically. And so that you either have a richer brown or a warmer brown or a cooler brown. I pay a lot of attention to temperature of colors. And I think if you got the temperature going right and the value right, then you get it going. I've heard, and one artist will tell you one thing about using blacks and browns, and then another artist will tell you something completely different, and they never use it, and you like both of their work. So try it.
Yeah.
You know, try it for yourself and see. Sometimes, it's a lot cheaper to use a black than try to mix it with expensive colors and stuff. But you never want to use a flat black. You want to have the richness of the purple in there, or the blue in there, or the warmth or the coolness, basically.
Do you use a medium?
I use oleo gel, neo meglip, and oleo gel.
Hmm. Why do
Um,
you use those? What's
I like the jelly consistency. It's just my personal taste. And rather than, I don't like a real soupy or liquidy, you know. Most of it is just alla prima.
hmm
Um, I don't use a whole lot. I like to work wet onto wet. So that's basically, I keep it that way.
hmm
But yeah, and I don't like a real smooth, I like to see brush strokes. Personally, it's just my taste. I like to see, I don't want to see it completely like in the saxophone. I like to see the contrasts in there that gives it that coppery look, or, you know, um, if you keep blending and blending and blending, you're just going to turn it to mud, or I do anyway.
hmm
So I kind of like lay colors on top of each other and then
Yeah,
pull them into each
this is
other.
this is a, a really good piece, and I'm glad we got to discuss it, because I think when we look at the design, that's another element. Again, that repetition of the arm to the repetition of the saxophone is really interesting. That repeating pattern, which I think, when we look at your work, I think there's a certain directional relationship that you put in the pieces, whether you do it consciously or just because of your background in design. You come to that. But his collar's doing the same thing. So when we look at his collar, we're looking at the saxophone, and we're looking at the arm, and then we're looking at the saxophone over here, and then we look at the diagonal of this figure in the back. There's a lot of repetition in your work, design wise. And I don't know if you consciously do that. Do you?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think that you're just good at understanding what it is to make a good design, and I think that most designers just have a feel for it. But I think that when you start to, kind of diagnose the painting, you really start to see some of these elements that you've created here. So we'll go on to the next one. You want to
Okay.
speak about that one?
That was my daughter-in-law, Dana. And I actually had to play down her eyes. They're so beautiful that, um, and that was when she was on her honeymoon. And I just love that picture. I love the look that she had on her face and everything. And so that won an award, got an honorable mention at the art space portrait competition there. But that was done a few years ago, quite a few years ago. But people always like this, so I put that one in. And I always
This is
liked it.
another one that feels very fresh, even though you've used the photo for most of the painting. But of course, it's interesting, the pieces that we're looking at right now. These people, you know,
Right, right.
which is another part of it, that you bring that sense of personality to the work. This is another really interesting piece, and I just love the movement in the hair and the glass like eyes that you've created. Is there anything you want to speak to about this one, design wise, or what you were really looking for, as to what was important in the work?
I just think that she was saying something to the person that she was looking at, and I tried to capture that. The background I just kept really loose and almost abstract.
Mhm.
Um, the background in my photo reference was they were in Greece, and but I just wanted to keep it on her face. I just kept it. Actually, just wanted to keep it really loose. This started out on panel, and I wasn't used to working on panel, and I kept lifting the paint off. I almost just gave up on this.
Mhm.
And then I just started playing with it again. I finally worked it enough so it had some tooth in the panel, and it worked out. But once I got started into it, it didn't take that long. It's very loose.
Oh,
Um,
it's a beauty. I think that here you really capture the glow of that face.
mhm,
It's really interesting. Your color combinations really accentuate the eyes. I'm talking about all the colors around the eyes,
mhm.
how powerful the eyes and the lips are. It's interesting that, it was Klimt that said, don't emphasize eyes, nose, and mouth equally. And here's a great example of eyes and mouth are the two elements that you were really focusing on. Was that intentional as well?
It's hard not to focus on her eyes. I mean, she has extraordinary eyes. They are like very blue with dark around it,
Hmm.
and extremely long eyelashes, and the shape of her eye is really beautiful too. So you can't get a likeness of her without accentuating her or focusing on her eyes. I mean, that's what you see when you first see her. I always had a hard time painting Dana, and simply because when she's a very happy person, and she has a very dynamic smile too, that it was almost like whenever she was smiling, and she'd smile in a photograph, that was good for a photo, but it didn't translate for me into a painting, and I didn't want to get that real smiley picture for a painting. So this was just a moment, and when she showed me this photograph, I just decided to paint it. But as far as her, that's just the way her lips are. Now, if her lips were bright red, that would have been too distracting, and I
Mhm.
wouldn't have done that. But yeah, it's to get her lightness, it's all in her eyes and her shape of her skin tone too. It's
Yeah.
really pretty.
Um, okay, so we're going to go on to the next one.
Okay. This one, I saw this woman. I was at a concert with a friend of mine, and I was actually on my way to a workshop in West Virginia, painting workshop. And a, a band was playing there that I really like, and we went to see them. And we stopped there on the way, and this woman was just having such a good time, and I just love the colors. And she was just sitting against the wall, and I just started taking. I mean, the people that were there were just colorful and having fun. You can see the joy on their face. Uh, and I just looked at her and it just reminded me of the 70s. And I just called this one Kindred Spirits. She doesn't know that I did this. um, but I mean, I liked the chair. I loved her arms and the beer bottle in her hand and the look on her face. And I really, really wanted to focus on her arms and the expression on her face. I liked the different um, shapes that were going on with the direction of the wood in the background and the dark window pushing her face forward. I just thought compositionally it really worked. Pulling it to that one side and having the window on the other side and her pretty much in the center. Um, I liked it. I liked the eyeglasses and the seashell necklace she had on, the whole hippie stuff. It was just, she did not hold back. So I called the Kindred Spirits.
Yeah.
And I
Well, there's
loved
a,
all the colors underneath in her neck. Um,
yeah,
she just had all this cool network going on in there where it was, just colors and blues and purples. And
well, you get a feel for this one too as a, personality. Again, I think this is one of the things that we're really touching on, where you really are capturing the inner spirit of people. All right. And I think
thank
that that's one of the things that you feel about your work. And I think that's the strength of your work. The, um, I think the interesting thing here is it's almost a genre piece, meaning that we connect with it as in a period of time,
you.
and it's interesting the kind of non-traditional uh, you know aspects of her dress and how you capture that as well. Um, yeah, that this one worked out quite well, and then the next one.
That one, another music one. I was at a friend's house for a party, and these guys were playing. The guy on the fiddle is is my friend's son, and the man on the tuba, he um, he he plays in Baltimore. He's a professor. Whatever. I mean, they were just playing there. There was more to this music, and this was the garden that was in. I loved the reflections of the tuba against his forehead and the top of his head and everything, and the bird feeder, just the whole thing. I liked it. I just snapped a bunch of pictures and I painted it. He ended up buying it from me. He had no idea. I asked him if I could do it,
Mhm.
and then I painted it, and he was like, "How much?" So
Yeah.
I took it out to him. And he's a really cool guy, but I really liked his shirt and the pants and the whole. I just call this one garden party because that's what it was. Just all these people jam in there. It was really fun.
Yeah, you can hear, what's really interesting is the juxtaposition of the two instruments, the violin and the tuba, or not, or the baritone, whatever that is. I guess
Yeah,
uh, probably a tuba in a way, all right?
I
It
think it's a two, but
looks
yeah,
too big. It looks too big for a baritone. But the thing is, I can hear the sound of those two pieces together, and it's kind of it's almost comical in that respect. And the same thing with the two figures. You can get the feeling of the difference in ages, and the weight of age. All right, which is
Right.
very interesting in the way the figure is positioned in the front. I think this is a really interesting piece as well. And, as I said, you can really hear the music. So now we'll go on to this piece.
Okay. Um, this is a saxophone, I think. Saxophone, something I don't even know.
Yeah, you have to
I
be a
thought it was a tuba
musician.
too, but someone corrected me. Um, this was taken a few years ago uh, at Union Station, and this group of guys were playing. They were collecting money or whatever they had. But it was kind of lonely. There wasn't a lot of people there, and I was just fascinated with the colors of his shirt, why they were there. They were doing it for someone because they all had a T-shirt of a woman's face on, and she had probably been hurt or something. I don't know. I don't know the story about that, but I did take a bunch of photos, and he caught me, and the look on his face was, distrust. Um, and then everything that happened recently with, and I kept going back to the photo over the year. I kept playing with the composition, thinking what I wanted to do with it. I like the combination of the geometrics and the realism also, and playing with that, the composition of it. So, and the different textures in there and the light, but the expression on his face. So anyway, I changed it a little bit. I moved things around, and I very subtly put on the instrument case in the background, which obviously isn't for what he's playing, a BLM for Black Lives Matter. And I didn't want to make it too screaming at you, but the look on his face just made me identify with what was going on at the time with Black Lives Matter, and all he was saying is, "Hear me," just
That's a
would.
good
And
point. I think that, here's your opportunity to express an idea that's a little different than what you've been doing, but there's a certain interest here that I think, just in the design, the way you've handled the structure of the figure, you can really feel a lot being communicated there as well. And I think the way we're looking up at him, which is a very, unusual kind of angle. I think the thing that I find that I'm going to ask you a question about is the blue and the blue cloth and the red hat. These are the only two areas. Most of the painting is somewhat close to being monochromatic or a value oriented painting, and then you add these two pieces of color for emphasis. Was that intentional?
yeah, well, it was that way. And yeah, I just wanted to pop some color in it just to make it interesting.
Mhm.
And it also said something about their personalities, that it was about them. That's why I put the guy in the background too. I didn't want it to be a portrait. I wanted to capture a moment where other things were going on as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I like the way the other figure is moving out of the space, which I
right.
think is quite interesting. And then we have this piece.
hmm This was actually for a demo for one of the Yellow Barn classes. Um, I actually had a student say something to me about wanting, and this again, it was all during the summer and everything, um, about he wanted to do a painting of a girl with a pearl earring, Vermeer's girl with a pearl earring, but only as a Black woman. So, and I didn't, I said, that sounds like a great idea. Be careful with that. But he was taking my class, and I also have a friend who told me his daughter was in town, and I said, "Oh, take some pictures of her. Take some pictures of Ariel and send them to me. This is what I'm doing. If you can get it in that pose." So he did. Now I put the earring on, And but
Fascinating.
she did the scarf and everything, and was just, I didn't intentionally, but it worked out. So it just really looked, that pose in that moment. I really loved playing with the colors of her skin and the reflective purple light, and from the earring and everything, the um, the detail in the face, and even in her braids, and the abstraction of the background. I just really liked the way it turned out. And that was a fast one. That was another one that was a demo for a class that I just got into and finished. I actually sold it to them too. I
Yeah,
should
this
do
is,
that
well,
more
you're
often.
capturing you're capturing the personalities and you're capturing them well. You can see how somebody would want this piece, but the connection to the pearl earring is a really interesting one. So that's fascinating. Beautiful piece. And then these,
This I did a while ago. It's of my grandkids, and they were on the beach, and I really loved. It's hard to see again because of the photo, but all the colors and Brody, my grandson's back, and the greens and the warms and the cools and everything, and they were playing on the beach, and how he's instructing his little sister. That's the girl that you saw in the first painting with the butterfly, and she was younger. Um, and how you can do a portrait without even doing a face,
yeah,
and capturing the composition. And I just find that interesting. This is one of my favorites. It's a personal one. It's of my grandkids, but I just loved his big brother connection with her, helping her out on the beach. Her
I
little
think
frilly bathing suit and hair, which it's hard to see in the photo. It's not a great photo, but yeah, it
yeah, I
was
think you touched on some really interesting aspects that a portrait doesn't always have to be from the front. And I think the other part of it that I think is really quite nice, not only is the gestures of the figures, they tend to be moving, uh, you know, whereas sometimes some of the pieces that you have, they're more portraits, okay,
fun.
where you could feel that somebody's sitting there, but these feel more natural in their setting because they don't seem to be noticing you. They're off on their own ideas. But the color combinations are really beautiful here, and I think that's one of the things that really speaks about the piece. Uh, and I think that the design as well, just how you balanced everything. So you have a good sense for picking out composition. That's one thing I can tell you. The next piece,
This one was for our mini class, actually, that we just did at the Yellow Barn. Um, and the group that I had we did a still life and a portrait, and they said, let's do a landscape. It was just the four classes. So I don't consider myself a expert landscape painter, but for some reason, I'm really attracted to sky. I love to paint sky and reflections in water, and color. I just, like that. So I did this as a demo, of course, finished it up after the class was done. Um, and that was, I think this was from the Eastern Shore, actually,
mhm.
around
Yeah,
there.
and that one worked out beautifully as well. But this shows the dimension of your abilities, and I think you can tackle any subject really. I think you have a great way of working with things. These are your still lifes,
It's still life.
and you're teaching a still life class.
I was teaching a still life class. This was actually at the Yellow Barn. Um, and I set up this still life class there when we could do that, when we could actually all be together. And then I finished it recently. I don't even know if this is the most finished copy. I did sell this piece, but yeah. So this was done at the Yellow Barn, and I when I set up the still life there, and then I took photos and I finished it by photos.
Yeah, and this is interesting. I mean, the nature, by the way, for those of you that are watching, uh, Marcia does have a still life class as well, and these are her still lifes. So they'll give you an idea of what you to expect as far as the things that she will be teaching. Um, Now that we're looking at these still lifes and we've looked at the portraits, let me ask you a question. What is it that you want your students to get when they take a class with you?
Well, one thing, if you can paint a still life, you can paint a portrait. And what I like to do is incorporate the two. But what I do want people to take away from them is paint what you're interested in. If you aren't interested in painting a figure, then don't paint it because you're just going to struggle with it, or at least not now. Start out with something like a still life. With this still life, that might not be totally accurate, whereas with a portrait, people get hung up on getting the likeness exactly right, and that almost sabotages them. So with this, you can loosen up if the lemon isn't exactly right, who knows? Or the can, or the leaf is, you can feel a little bit looser, but you study the relationships between shapes and color with each other, and you can do it with a freer mind.
And
Um,
do you welcome beginning students?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you're really
Beginning
good
and
at working.
intermediate, because we work with both. I start from the beginning, and there's no to beginning a question. I teach the way I learn. I teach intuitively. I don't use grids. I I understand if you want to, if that makes you feel I can show you how to, if it makes you feel more confident, because confidence is everything. So if I'm going to show you, just put a plumb line down the center of this and say, okay, we're going to measure the distance between that leaf and the plumb line, you're pretty much setting up a grid.
Mhm.
I do that intuitively, and I show you how to do it by holding up a pen or whatever, because you are constantly measuring
Yeah.
with each other. It's really where you find your anchor point and your sense of balance. And when you're a beginner, all those words can intimidate you. But I've had quite a few students that say, well, I'm really comfortable just doing the grid. Then do the grid. And especially if it helps you learn how to draw, then do the grid. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
It really is what works for you.
Well, and I
I
think
am not a person that is real mathematical and lining things up and measuring things up. That to me is that would just tightens me up. It's just not me. But
yeah.
if it works for you, I'll show you my way to do it.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things when you look everyone at what Marcia's done here, it really is inspiring, and I think that the this is important now for you to think about your own, uh, what do you want to learn, and if Marcia, has the approach that really you're looking for, which I think honestly for anybody who's starting out, particularly, will. Uh, Definitely one to take like the still life class. I think that's a good one. And then when you get into if you want to really explore portraits, Marcia has gives you the opportunity to really do that, and you can see her experience with it. Okay, so with that, we're going to kind of stop sharing the screen and just talk a few minutes here just to say I really appreciate you agreeing to this interview. I think
Well,
it
I
went really
appreciate
well.
it. Thank
I
you.
think I think people get to see who you are and how easygoing you are, and how you really do bring a nurturing feeling to students, and the atmosphere in the class. And I think everyone that I've talked to, they've all really have nothing but really fine words about you and your classes. So, is there anything else you want to say before we leave?
I don't think so. Just sign up for a class.
I think this is it. We want to really get you students. I think this is an important part of, uh, your career as a teacher. I think you bring a lot to your students, and honestly, this is one of the things that I think when an artist has reached a certain stage in their careers, one of the keys is to really pass on a lot about what they know to their students, and you do that well. Well, with
Well,
that, folks, I'm going to say thank you for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this presentation, and I hope
well,
to
I
see
just want
you.
to say thank you also
You know,
to you
you're
very
so
much.
you're so welcome. I think The opportunity to be able to do this is real important for all of us. And I think, so with that, I think hopefully you'll wind up taking one of Marcia's classes. I really recommend it. And, if you have any questions or anything like that, you just go to the yellowbarnstudio.com website. There's all the information there on classes that you'll find. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you again.